All right, thanks everyone. It's great to be here this morning. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about my role at Seagate, our team, and then we'll get into our presentation. So, Seagate is obviously one of the largest hard drive suppliers in the world. We have a team of 4 people that are focused on nothing but Web3. We think this is, we're very, very bullish on this space. Everything that Filecoin and Protocol Labs are doing, and obviously your community as well. So very, very happy to be here. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about Seagate, its strategy. We'll talk a little bit about data moving from the core, or kind of the very centralized space, out to the edge, which obviously Filecoin is a very strong catalyst for that. We'll talk about the growth of this market and how we expect it to continue to grow. We'll go a little bit more detail into Filecoin market dynamics, how we look at this space and what we think the key drivers are. And then we'll talk a little bit about Seagate's, as the earlier gentleman mentioned, how are we thinking about this space? What can we do differently to ensure that storage providers are able to better optimize around solutions for the Filecoin market? Okay. So just super high level, this is something that we put together that, for us, when we look at the space, it fits really, it checks all the boxes. Obviously, we've got a ton of data growth. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but just incredible to see how much growth there was, certainly last year and leading up into this year, and still continues to grow. We'll talk a little bit about those rates of growth. The innovation element of this is something that really gets us excited, and this goes all the way up to our executives. When you listen to earnings calls by the likes of Azure or Twitter or Microsoft or even Google, you'll have analysts ask them about the Web3 community, and they'll talk about how important the developer community is in the space. So really, really exciting to see that. We'll talk about the rise of the edge and where data is moving, and which, in our view, as we look at Filecoin and the virtual machine, and how compute can be brought to the data. This is another really exciting opportunity for us and all of you as well. As a service, we think this is a really strong opportunity in the future as that compute starts to happen, as well as the workloads improve as far as what you can do with data storage technologies within the community. And then obviously just, everyone that we see within this space and how that ecosystem is evolving as well, is just all of these things combined, basically make this one of the most exciting things I've personally worked on in the last, 15, 20 years, and just the energy level is so awesome to see. Okay, so this is kind of a conceptual view as how Seagate thinks about, the core and how data and compute moves out to the edge. And where we're spending a lot of time and focus. If you kind of look at here, you can see some of the various different segments and types of workloads that are causing this to happen. You can see here at the upper left how much and how big of a role Filecoin is as a part of this movement. 17 exabytes is incredible. It really is, and I think we might even be over 18 at this point. So just incredible growth here. And this, I think, this comes from an IDC presentation, or at least IDC-based data. And I think the importance of this slide, if you think about how these types of evolutions happen, they do take time. And this is kind of an interesting view because it looks back to 2010, obviously to 20, and then forward into 30. And what you're seeing here is where data resides. You can see in 2010, a ton of it sat at endpoints, and this would be computer terminals, to some extent phones, but you can see only 11% of it sat at the core, at the cloud guys, if you will, and then only 2% at these little edge nodes, if you will, that we saw on the previous slide. Flash forward to 2020, the core has become huge, so the cloud, mega cloud folks, over half of the data sits there now, or at least in 2020. But the edge also grew to about 19%. And so if you kind of play that forward and think about where this is going, you can kind of see 2030, it's a much more balanced core and edge type of environment where it's kind of 56, 41% type of thing. And so I guess the key point of this is the edge storage, which obviously Filecoin is a huge part of. We expect that to grow 25% annually, or at least that the edge being 25% growth annually, and obviously Filecoin being a very big part of that. So very exciting. All right, so let's turn a little bit now into just Filecoin. And you know, for us, kind of looking back at 2010 is an interesting perspective, because when you compare what Filecoin's done just in the 13 months of mainnet launch, compare it to what the combined entities of Google, Microsoft, and AWS did. AWS was obviously the first in 2006, but then you had Google Cloud come on in 2008, and then Azure in 2010. And by 2012, those three combined were at 15 exabytes. So took them, you know, 6 years in the case of AWS, but all three of them over that period of time, 15 exabytes. And then Filecoin comes around, mainnet launch, 13 months later, 15 exabytes. So if you think about that in perspective as to kind of how much growth there is, and yet still to come as well, you know, I think this is just something that when we look at this stuff, we're just kind of like, wow, it's pretty incredible what's been accomplished so far. So kudos to everyone who's been involved in that. All right, so now, you know, kind of taking that one step further, you know, and thinking, okay, how is this going to play forward? And I think Juan presented yesterday on all the things that are being worked on here. And how does innovation typically happen? I think, you know, this to us is a very good illustration, and we talk about this a lot at our company and how we present on Web3. Clayton Christensen is a pretty renowned Harvard Business Review author. He's done a number of case studies, articles, books around how business evolves. You know, and this one to us was a very relevant picture, and in fact, it mapped over very closely with what Filecoin's looking to do. You can see the graph here. It basically shows that over the course of time, how does technology disrupt? And it starts kind of in these low quality use cases and just kind of works its way up type of thing, right? And then we looked at, I think this was a slide from an earlier Filecoin deck, as looking at the different workloads that it was hoping to address from an enterprise perspective. And we've actually color-coded these to kind of illustrate, you know, where these fit, in our opinion, against this conceptual map. And you can kind of see that, you know, clearly public archive data, backups of public data are you know, the most commonly used applications that we're seeing today. But then, you know, stepping up from there, you get into these, you know, more storage-centric, other types of cloud services offerings. And then obviously from there, there's, you know, further and further up the chain you go, the more and more disruptive the space becomes. What's really important about this analysis we've got here is when you take this kind of concept and try to relate it to, you know, how big are these markets that are potentially being disrupted. In 2020, and unfortunately we don't have really good data for 2021 yet, but in 2020, the cloud services market as a whole was a $40 billion a year market. And there's estimates where it's upwards of 80, depending on how much you weave in as a service-based kind of services. But at a minimum, $40 billion a year. And then you kind of take just the storage side of that, and it's about $32 billion a year. So if you think about, as a storage provider, you know, what you're doing today and how you're building out your capacity, you know, in our view, that seems like that's just the beginning, and really the opportunity here is your ability to, you know, charge, you know, more and more for deals, and especially as the applications become more evolved and compute becomes a bigger part of it, or you know, all of the other various services and things that you can layer onto the current set of offerings, to us is a huge opportunity that we haven't even, you know, that's going to be there, but it right now is a very nascent kind of state. Okay, so we do have a few slides here that you know, we kind of, you know, the big topic is FIL price and you know, what's going to happen there. And so we've actually spent a fair amount of time looking at this as well, because for Seagate, you know, 17 exabytes is not insignificant. In fact, it's huge. No one at Seagate predicted this 2 years ago, and we actually got hit with, you probably are aware, there weren't a whole lot of hard drives available to the market a year and a half ago. And so, in our view, we missed that, completely missed it. The market was constrained, and we want to make sure that that never happens again. And so we're kind of spending a lot of time looking at the market and what are the key indicators that could potentially show us when this market, kind of rebounds and fill price goes up again, and there's a massive new, purchase activity on hard drives. And so we kind of looked at this. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Starboard dashboard. It's an awesome site if you haven't already been there. Get all kinds of information about deal activity, onboarding, et cetera. And so what you see here on this slide, on the top graph is literally just sector onboarding, right? So new capacity put online on the Filecoin network. It's broken out by 32 and 64 gigabyte sectors. But you can kind of see you have this period of pretty radical growth where these are each day how much new sectors were brought online. And then obviously kind of mid-October type of thing, that growth slowed and it kind of went into more of a more linear state. And so what's interesting about that when you compare it to on the dashboard, on the Starboard dashboard, they also have how much fill is locked. So whether that's in the form of collateral, it's been burned, what have you. And so these blue stacked lines on the bottom chart indicate that. So as a percentage of all fill minted, how much is basically either locked or no longer in circulation. And so you can kind of see at that peak when, at the height of the growth, we got up over 60% fill locked, right? So, which is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is it means there's less in circulation. So there's a bit of an element of fill scarcity, which is going to, keep the fill price nice and solid. And then it also, when there's more buying than selling, obviously it's going to drive price up. So, and then we kind of hit this point where, growth slowed, and, fill became a little bit more available, and obviously the fill price. By the way, the green line, you could probably guess, is the price of fill. So we kind of, in our view, it's impossible to 100% correlate the two, but we do believe that there's a relationship between fill price and the percentage of fill locked, as a percentage of what's in circulation. So, and by the way, this upper graph is in PIBs, right? And now we have, a similar graph. Now, instead of looking at sector onboarding, we're looking at newly committed deals, and this is in TIBs, right? So, 1/1000th of what we're looking at before, but we see a similar pattern, right? And so we kind of view this as we're now in this what needed to happen phase of utilization of all the capacity that's been brought online. And what's very encouraging here too is there's clearly this very, very strong trend up and to the right. Now, what does this mean, and when does this start to affect fill locked and ultimately, create a little bit more scarcity of fill? And there, obviously, if that happens, that means there's purchase activity more than selling, and that should drive fill price up. And I think Juan may have talked about it yesterday, but to get us there, we need about 3 to 5 PIBs of onboarding a day to get there, which is obviously about 5 to 8x of what we're seeing today. The good news, obviously, is that we're trending in the right direction, right? So, that's, when we look at this space, this is a huge part of us that when we we monitor this every single day to see, okay, how is this shaping up? What can we do to enable it, quite frankly, as well? And really wanted to emphasize in the form of these charts how important it is to get this data onboarding moving in the right direction, which it is, but it's also something that we can control, right? I mean, there's a lot of external factors. What can we control? This is one of those things, and I just want to kind of really state that this is something that we in our opinion, thinks is so vitally important to the health of this market. Okay, another thing that we've done to try to better understand this is we've looked at a lot of the data cap requests. So there's obviously a number of sources where you can go off and do that. And we're trying to understand, okay, to the extent that we can help connect folks that want to back up data with storage providers, what types of data are being, what types of academic institutions or companies or any type of company that is looking to do backup as inexpensively and their workload is very well suited to the Filecoin storage provider network. Who are they? What types of data are they looking to back up? And then obviously, and then also, how are they backing up? And this was kind of the one that was really, really interesting to us. So, when we looked at this, we actually have someone who's an intern that's spent about a week looking at the stuff. It was really, really, really interesting. But there's 247 PIBs. If you just say, only show me those data sets where they're looking for data cap of at least 200 TIBs, how much data is that? So there's almost 250 PIBs of data, which is outstanding. 67 companies. And then, like I said earlier, like who are these companies and what kind of data are they looking to put on there? So, the company type was pretty interesting. It's very hard. It's kind of subjectively written information. It's just written into a form. It's not drop down, so it's kind of hard to really synthesize it down into different groupings. But you can see about 40% of it was kind of blockchain NFT related content. About half of it was, we just kind of call it blockchain, non-NFT related, and then 10% academic based. So, and this is something where, when you sit in on Slack channels or read articles or talk to storage providers, clearly there is a lot of data potential that a lot of academic institutions capture but toss away because they just don't have the resources or the funding to make sure that they're storing everything, and they can go back and look and compute through it to see, whatever it is they're trying to seeking to find. And so we believe academics is a huge part of this. It only says 10% here, but we think that as this market becomes more and more known, more evolved, it'll be a huge part of this. And then the data types, not unsurprising. A lot of audio and video. So, and this again, I think speaks to, once we get to moving the data further to the edge, getting FVM, other things going, and content delivery, working, more responsive, lower latency, all those types of things. This is a huge, huge opportunity, obviously, because it just consumes so much data. And then the third pie chart you see here, to us is really, really interesting. We offer a solution which is basically an offline data onboarding solution, but we were surprised to see that if let's just say you take half of the both, we're looking at online or offline data transfer, you're kind of at like 58% interested in offline data transfer. So, which is really surprising to us, really interesting. I'll talk a little bit about kind of how we're trying to address that as well. So this is we have an offering called Live Mobile. I wish it were available in Canada. It is not. We're working on that right now. It is available in the U.S. It's available in, I think, 20 countries in EMEA. But basically, it addresses this challenge of getting large pieces of data from a source to an endpoint, or in the case of Filecoin, the storage provider. And we actually have on our website a tool where you can go in there and plug in essentially the numbers that you see at the left side of the screen. How much data are you trying to move? What is your network setup? And talking to storage providers, it's interesting when you kind of consider the source that's providing the data. These may be aggressive. So we've commonly heard 20% is kind of, or 80% is the constraint that gets impacted because of throughput. And so what you can see with this chart on the right is when you take all these these specs, if you will, plug them into this calculator, you can kind of see how long it would take to literally on an online basis transfer this data over. In this case, you literally save 34 days. And so in the case of storage providers, obviously that is very directly attributable to savings or earnings that you generate, right? So the longer it takes you to data on board, obviously the less money you're able to make. And so this was something that was pretty eye-opening to us. You'll probably hear a lot more from Seagate in the coming weeks, months, quarters about Live Mobile. and how we can help drive this message better. We're working with Filecoin on a proof of concept around this to just make it even more clear the benefits of this. And then you can kind of see some of the what these products look like. But it's really, really exciting stuff. And then Core Vault, if you're not already aware, we've got, so Seagate, we obviously do disk drives, but we also have systems. We do super highly dense systems. We've got several JBOD offerings. We've got a 5U84, a 4U106. We also have a very cool product called Core Vault, which has built into it a number of features which will help with slashing costs. So should a sector go bad, should data go missing, the drive sees this. It basically tells the system, hey, we're missing a block. Let's take this drive offline. That data has been backed up within the system, so there's over provisioning that's happening, and basically it rebuilds itself very, very quickly. I would say best in class as far as competing products goes. So obviously this ability helps considerably with slashing costs, and it, by the way, is priced the same as what a 4U106 JBOD is priced at. So really, really exciting product. A lot of storage providers we talk to are purchasing this product and love it. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that. Yeah, and that's all I had. Thank you very much for your time. I was asked to talk a little bit about, after the panel, we do have a giveaway that we're doing. So once the panel's over, if everyone could move to kind of the first couple of rows. I think the way they're doing the giveaway is based upon where you're sitting in the first couple of rows. Anyway, I think that's all I had today, unless there's any questions, but thank you very much for your time.